While Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the two leaders had a detailed discussion on the evolving situation in Afghanistan. Prime Minister Modi tweeted about the conversation, saying that he had a detailed and useful exchange of views with my friend President Putin on the recent developments in Afghanistan. The two leaders also agreed to establish a permanent channel for bilateral consultations on the developments in Afghanistan. On Monday, Prime Minister Modi had spoken to German Chancellor Angela Merkel over the Afghanistan situation and its implications on the region and the world. Both leaders emphasized the importance of maintaining peace and security. Meanwhile, India has ramped up its evacuations with just a week left for the August 31st deadline. A group of 44 Sikhs and Hindus who had taken shelter at a Gurdwara in Kabul have now been evacuated and were flown to Delhi today. They carried 3 of the last 6 troops of the holy scripture of Sri Guru Granth Sahib. Sri Guru Granth Sahib is more than just a holy scripture for the followers of Sikhism. It contains the teachings of their gurus, including the founder of Sikhism, Guru Nanak Dev. India's Union Ministers Hardeep Singh Puri received the holy scriptures at the Delhi airport. 44 people, including 25 Indian nationals, were evacuated from Kabul to Dushanbe by the Indian Air Force. And from there, an Air India flight with a total of 78 passengers landed in Delhi today. Since the Taliban took control, 24 Afghan Sikhs have already been evacuated and brought to India. This included 2 minority Sikh MPs, Narinder Singh Khalsa and Anarkali Kaur Honaryar.
Ministry of
For more details, our correspondent Siddhant Sibil is now joining us live on this broadcast from New Delhi. Siddhant, thanks for joining us. Now, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held talks with his Russian counterpart, focused on the Afghanistan crisis, of course. Tell us some of the highlights.
Well, it's an important conversation which has happened between the Indian Prime Minister and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. One of the key outcomes is, of course, on Afghanistan. It was a 45-minute long conversation. On Afghanistan, both India and Russia have announced that they are going to form a permanent channel of communication for the situation in Afghanistan. And this is happening in the backdrop of an interesting visit from India to Russia. Last week, the Deputy NSA of India, Pankaj Saran, who was in fact the former envoy as well in Russia, India's envoy to Russia, was on a visit to Russia. And this in the backdrop of the fall of Kabul when it comes to Taliban taking control of the city. And during this meeting, he had conversation with the Russian NSA. And now this development happening, the announcement of a permanent channel is, of course, a practical implementation of the good relationship between Moscow and New Delhi. We know India has been conversing with many countries. The Indian External Affairs Minister has spoken to the US Secretary of State many times last week. He has spoken to the French Foreign Minister, the British counterpart as well. But when it comes to this leaders level conversation between the Indian side and the Russian side, this is a major practical outcome on Afghanistan between the two sides, and shows that how both countries are willing to work together on the situation. Remember, the situation in Afghanistan has a direct security challenge for both India and Russia. India, for obvious reasons, that Pak-based international terror groups can, of course, now have safe haven in Afghanistan. But also the situation, the crisis in Afghanistan can have a spillover effect on Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and these countries have close linkages with Russia. So obviously the Russians are worried about the ongoing situation and development in Afghanistan.
Siddhant, the Indian Prime Minister also spoke to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. How are these talks going to affect the Indian strategy towards Afghanistan?
Well, right now, globally, if you look at world leaders are talking to each other. In fact, in a short while from now, in approximately 2 hours from now 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, the G7 leaders will be having conversation. Even as I speak, the BRICS NSA are going to start their conversation. It is being hosted by the Indian side. The Indian NSA, Ajit Doval, is going to host this meeting. We know that a few hours ago, the UNHCR saw the meeting in which the Indian envoy to UN in Geneva, Indramani Pandey talked about these international terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed finding a foothold in Afghanistan. So it's part of the ongoing conversation when it comes to Germany. We know that it's a close relationship with Germany as well, and European countries as well. European countries have been quite vocal about the situation in Afghanistan, and there have been convergences between Europe and India. Both have been calling for an inclusive government in Kabul, an inclusive government which is not dominated by Pakhtuns but also by Tajiks, by Hazaras, by Uzbek, which basically represents the entire ethnicity, the complex ethnicity and diversity of Afghanistan. So we will in fact expect more conversations between the Indian side and various foreign counterparts.
Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us on WION at this hour with all those inputs. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.